Redesigning the supply chain from the inside out, the impact of Trump's tariffs, and Walmart's U.S. supply chain playbook. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 232 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, and welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 232. This is the podcast that is tech agnostic, independent, and covers everything related to the world of digital transformation, including people, process, technology, and strategy. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And Third Stage Consulting is also the sponsor of this podcast. So thank you for being here today. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great show planned. We're going to talk a lot about supply chain stuff today. So if you're super into supply chain management like I am, you're going to want to stick around for this entire episode. We've got a lot to cover. We're going to open up with some social media questions. We'll get into some newsworthy topics. The two topics we'll cover today are Trump's tariffs, tracking the status of international trade actions, and we'll also talk about Walmart's U.S. supply chain playbook, which is going to be super interesting to talk about because I remember studying Walmart's supply chain back in the 90s when I studied supply chain management originally in my master's program. So it'll be fun to talk about the updates and evolutions to Walmart's supply chain. And then later in the show, we're going to have a panel discussion with several speakers that are going to be speaking at our Digital Stratosphere conference coming up in August of this year. You can learn more about that conference, by the way, by going to stratosphere2025.com. It's a tech agnostic conference with over a dozen different speakers over the course of a couple of days. You can join in person in Denver, Colorado, or you can join remotely, virtually online. So you can learn more about that at stratosphere2025.com. But we'll have 4 of the speakers that are going to be joining us at the conference. They'll be joining us here today to talk about how to redesign the supply chain from the inside out. So we'll talk about the people, process, and technology sides of supply chain management and just change in general too. Even if you're not solely focused on supply chain management in your role, you'll still want to stick around because it's a great panel. It includes Baan, who has been in the ERP technology space now for close to 50 years. Emma Roloff, who's a people first advocate and consultant. We'll have Jenkins, who's a supply chain management expert and consultant. And we'll also have Quinn, who is known as the distribution guy. He's a distribution and supply chain consultant as well. He'll be on. All 4 of those panelists will be joining me later to discuss this topic around redesigning the supply chain from the inside out. And then last but not least, later in the show, we'll talk about simple ways to make your supply chain stronger in 2025. So lots to cover here today. But before we dive into our guests and newsworthy topics, you've got some social media questions we've received recently, Darian.
Yeah, we have a couple questions today. This first one is, Eric, have you ever tried calculating the ROI of an ERP upgrade or a brand new implementation?
Yes, we've done both. In fact, I highly encourage most teams to do both because there is, and when I say both, I guess I'm assuming that there's a difference between doing more of an incremental upgrade to your existing system versus doing a complete replacement. And assuming I'm understanding the question correctly, then I would say yes to both of those. And I think it's really important because it gives you and your leadership team some confidence that you've explored your options. Because let's face it, there is the option, even though most technology vendors will not admit this, and most of them will probably not agree with me on this, at least not out loud or in public, but you should be considering lower cost options that might be lower risk, that might actually give you good enough benefits to give you a really strong ROI. You should at least compare that option to a more risky, a more costly potential rip and replace of your technology. And I think it's really important, no matter which path you go down. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but what's even more important, or what's important to help you decide the right path forward, is to look at the ROI, because I think you as a leadership team and you as an organization have to make sure you're all on the same page in understanding what the risks, what the cost benefits are. If you are going to go down the path of a full-blown rip and replace, a full transformation, it could potentially deliver more value longer term, but it could also likely lead to higher costs in the short term. It's probably going to be more disruptive in the short term. It's probably going to be riskier in the short term. So you want to quantify all that stuff and compare the two, because neither one's going to be perfect. Neither one's going to give you the easy answer, but at least it gives you a couple scenarios that you can look at to get everyone on the same page and make sure your leadership team buys into whatever direction you decide to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And our second question today is, would you say that private companies are more successful at implementing new systems compared to the governments?
That's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, actually, because, first of all, we have a pretty even split of private sector versus public sector clients. I mean, actually, most of our revenue comes from the public sector, but in terms of number of clients, we probably have slightly more in the private sector. But I would say the advantage that private sector companies have is they have the profit motive, and they do have clear accountability. I mean, if something goes dramatically wrong with a project or with a company in general, heads usually start to roll. I mean, someone's going to be responsible, as far as, if a company fails or if a project fails. Private companies are usually quicker to respond, largely because they can. They don't have to go through the political process that a lot of public sector organizations have to. So it creates a clear line of accountability and a clear urgency. And it's, that profit motive is really powerful too. Companies, even though they are reckless at times with their spending on technology, they generally speaking are focused on making sure that they're profitable. Government and public sector entities, on the other hand, don't have that same profit motive. They don't necessarily have the same level of accountability, not necessarily because they're bad people or unqualified people. It's just the nature of the beast, of a political organization that has multiple stakeholders and constituents. It doesn't have one clear purpose of just driving profit, which is what the private sector does or tends to focus more on. Government has a lot more conflicting and competing priorities and stakeholders and constituents they have to answer to. So that creates a certain amount of a lack of accountability, because now you've got multiple people with no one clear line of sight. And I'm stereotyping, I'm generalizing here. This isn't always true, but you tend to see that dynamic a bit more in the government space. And I think the other thing that works against government is the fact that their processes are so different. It's so different than the public sector, which isn't a bad thing, but it does create more of a strain on your technology systems that you use, because you're doing things that, in the world of manufacturing, for example, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, other manufacturers out there in the world that you can, learn from, that you can leverage technologies that they've used. And there's a lot of technology options for manufacturing companies. There's not a ton of options that are built specifically for government. And so of the ones that are, you have, first of all, you have a more limited pool of options, but also, government entities just have such diverse needs in terms of, you think about things like taxation and permits and treasury needs, budget needs, all these different things that are just something you don't see in the private sector. And so finding technology that fits all that is more challenging. So all that being said, I'd say yes, generally speaking, I'd say implementations, transformations in general are more difficult in the public sector.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense for sure. But I want to get into our newsworthy articles today. We're going to be talking a lot about supply chain, tariffs, different things like that. To start today, though, we're going to talk about the potential tariffs that are back. And I feel like there's been a lot of buzz kind of around this whole year. But there's a potential return of the tariffs specifically on Canada, Mexico, China, and the EU, with an August 1st deadline approaching for trade negotiations. If new agreements aren't reached, we could see tariffs up to 35% on a wide range of goods. This is something that CIOs and supply chain leaders have to obviously track very closely. Price fluctuation, supplier uncertainty, and potential shifts in sourcing strategies all have big implications for ERP systems, planning tools, and overall business agility. Some companies are already taking action, from front loading inventory to diversifying their supplier base. Others are looking at how technology can help them stay resilient, whether that's through scenario planning, automated forecasting, or more real-time data visibility. So the question with this, Eric, is how can businesses use tech to adapt quickly when global conditions are in a flux?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was actually reading just last week in the Wall Street Journal, they had an article that talks about how even though there's been all this escalating and changing trade war type stuff happening with tariffs with Trump in the U.S., despite all of that, global economic growth is actually staying pretty resilient and pretty solid. And what they're saying is that the hypothesis of this article, talking to economists and whatnot, is that the pandemic in 2020 taught supply chain managers and organizations in general how to navigate quickly to curveballs like this. So you think about all the changes supply chain managers had to go through in 2020 just to navigate the weirdness of supply chain management in during a COVID times. That stuck with these organizations now to where the tariffs come around, and it's actually not as big of a deal for a lot of these supply chain managers to navigate tariffs as it was to navigate COVID. So they're sort of well conditioned or prepared in many cases based on that. But I think there's things still that you need to do to make sure that you are doing a lot of the things you said: the scenario planning, the what if analysis, understanding where the risks and bottlenecks are. And that's where concepts like the digital twin come into place. There's the concept of setting up a digital twin, which is essentially a simulation of your actual supply chain, but you change the variables. So you could see what happens if a war breaks out in a certain part of the world and it affects all of your supplier base in that part of the world. What would that do to your supply chain, and where are the risks with that? And so that's where the concept of digital twin can come in handy and be a great tool, mechanism to do some of that scenario what if analysis planning that you're talking about. And I think that's what organizations need to do, is they just need to understand that, yeah, you're not going to predict the future. We have no idea what Trump or the US or politicians in general are going to do day to day. So let's not try too hard, but instead let's build a supply chain that can adapt to whatever, politicians or the world might throw at us. So I think that's probably the short answer is to look at digital twin and other technology tools. That's where technology could be really powerful, is to help you understand some of those risks and problems that could arise in the future.
For sure. And to get a little bit deeper into that, are there ways companies can build like real-time responsiveness into their planning tools without overhauling their entire tech stack?
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of times companies think they have to do what you said, replace the entire tech stack, which could take years. And we're sitting here in 2025 trying to figure out how to address these challenges now. And so I think, a lot of what organizations can do is they can certainly, you could have two parallel paths you pursue. One might be the long-term path that is the more ideal path, but then you have a shorter term interim parallel path that's getting you immediate value. So, we see a lot of clients right now, they're saying, let's hold off on our ERP initiative, our broader ERP replacement initiative. We'll still do it, but we're planning, 3 to 4 years out for something like that. Whereas we want to look at AI and other tools we can get immediate value out of right now. And those two paths will eventually merge together and coexist. So they're not competing or duplicate efforts necessarily. It's just reprioritizing where you can get the most value. And I think it's actually super healthy for companies to think that way, because the good thing with what you're describing is whenever there's a crisis like this or a challenge or a problem, it tends to make leaders a lot more laser focused on what's important. And it makes it easier for them to throw out the garbage and just ignore the noise, of options. Whereas in good times, when there's not that level of urgency, it's a lot easier to get enamored by cool bells and whistles and technologies that you don't necessarily need and aren't going to necessarily deliver you value in the short term or long term, or maybe never. So I think that that's the good silver lining in all this, is it does create a sense of urgency and clarity for a lot of leaders in terms of what they need to focus on to get more immediate value and not necessarily have to wait years and years to replace their entire tech stack.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting for sure. But to get into our next newsworthy article today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Walmart and their supply chain strategy that is global now. And so they're kind of turning heads again. They're in the news, and this time by rolling out its proven US supply chain tactics on a global scale. So, according to a recent corporate release, the retail giant is implementing real-time AI and automation systems in countries like Mexico, Costa Rica, and Canada. These systems include smart tools like self-healing inventory, which automatically reroutes stock to the right locations, predictive warehouse and transportation management, improving everything from routing produce shipments in Costa Rica to optimizing delivery paths before staff even arrives. So it's not just really about efficiency, it's about the scale they're doing it at. Walmart says these innovations have already saved over 55 million in Mexico alone. And that's not just numbers, it's real transformation across dairy, produce, general merchandise, and beyond. So this massive tech investment that they made shows how global supply chains are evolving from reactive to predictive and from more manual to more autonomous. So Eric, with this, what does it take to scale a US built supply chain AI system across, global markets like Walmart is doing?
Well, I think AI is one of the more scalable tools out there as far as being able to deploy quickly and at scale. That's the beauty, excuse me, that's the beauty of that technology. So I think that that is first is making sure you have a technology that can scale, because a lot of traditional old school ERP systems just don't scale. And that's one of the big problems with that technology. So I think AI can provide a better path or a better alternative for that. But I think more than that, I mean, aside from just the technology that can scale, it's also looking at, back to your earlier question about how you set up your supply chain and how you plan for risks and challenges and unexpected macro events that can affect your supply chain. I think that's the ultimate definition of scalability in supply chain management. So having the right tools is part of that, but you also need the right strategy, the right processes, the right people, the right training of the people. There's just so many pieces of that recipe, or so many components of that recipe that need to come together to create that scalability. It goes well beyond the tool set, though.
For sure. And to get more into that, what should CIOs consider when integrating agentic AI or self-healing inventory tools with core ERP systems?
Well, I think, you certainly want to combine the tool with the people. And that's something we'll get into with the panel discussion here in a few minutes when we bring them on, because we want to talk about the intersection of people, process, and technology along with your strategy in this panel discussion. And that's really the key, is to make sure that you're bringing people along, that they become part of the solution, and that the AI is working hand in hand and in concert with people, not necessarily just replacing people or throwing AI at a problem. It's more having a well-defined process, a well-defined job role and job descriptions that explain clearly how people are going to be using AI to accomplish whatever their goal or their task is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question with this, with Walmart being so large, I mean, compared to a lot of companies that would be looking at implementing something like this, is Walmart's in-house customized approach something more companies should aim for, or is it too ambitious for most and they should maybe look at a different route?
I have no problem with the in-house developed approach. I mean, I think, you can certainly leverage outside consulting expertise, but I would not over depend, or I would not rely I would not create an over dependency on consultants to enable your change. If you're not an AI expert, or you don't have certain skill sets in house, that's okay. Bring in those outside experts, but don't just outsource the entire project to them. I think it's actually good to have someone like in the case of Walmart, them owning their project. And that's, if you think about it too, Walmart should be erring on the side of doing more of this in-house, because supply chain management has always been their thing. I mean, that's their secret sauce, their competitive advantage. That's how they're able to keep prices so low compared to their competitors, is because they're so good at supply chain management. So this is where you want to create something that's different, because that's such a distinct advantage to them and it's hard to replicate. So they're going to be less likely to go out and just defer to a bunch of consultants who have best practices that they've learned from other customers. Walmart's creating something different. And that for that reason, yes, you can take outside inputs and influences, but at the end of the day, they have to make it their own secret sauce. And it certainly creates that, as well as a higher degree of ownership for the change itself when it's self-driven or when it's primarily driven in-house.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some good, interesting articles today, but I'm excited to get more into everything supply chain with today's guests.
Yeah, we'll continue rolling with the supply chain thread here when we bring in our panel of experts. It's a small subset of experts that you will see at our Digital Stratosphere Conference 2025, which is at the end of August. You can join in person in Denver, or you can join remotely from anywhere in the world. We have virtual passes available as well as in-person passes. But we'll have 4 panelists from that conference joining us to talk about how to rebuild and redesign your supply chain from the inside out, looking at the people, process, and technology sides of things. So we'll get into that here in just a moment. We'll take a quick break, and we'll bring on the panel. So stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I don't mind letting you down easy, but just give it time.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 232. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their digital transformations, their supply chain transformations, and their overall change journeys. So you can learn more about us by going to thirdstage-consulting.com. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. So thanks for being here today. I'm excited for our next panel. We've got 4 panelists joining us here that are going to discuss with me how to redesign the supply chain from the inside out. We'll talk about strategy, people, process, and technology, and how all that stuff comes together to help enable supply chain transformations, as well as just general digital transformations and change initiatives in general. But joining me are going to be 4 panelists who are also going to be joining us at the Digital Stratosphere Conference. I'm just going to go around here real quickly and do introductions, starting with you, Emma.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I fall into the camp of liking music from both sides, but based off of age, I grew up and was born and bred to listen to the 2000s and specifically crappy rap. So I've got a lot of those lyrics in my mind, if anybody was curious. But I focus more on the people side of technology, like Eric mentioned. I come from a background of over a decade of enterprise technology sales. And during that time, I realized I can bring in the shiny objects all I want, but if I don't have the buy-in from the people side, chances are the project's not going to be as successful as I'm saying it's going to be. And so I started to look at things from a different angle and kind of became obsessed. And so I'm going to be kind of adding in some of that color commentary on how to bring the technology and the people together.
Great. Great to have you here again, and look forward to seeing you in Denver at Stratosphere next month. Also joining is Will, the distribution guy, Quinn. Thanks for
Hey,
joining us.
everybody. Thanks for having me, Eric. Yeah, I am Will Quinn. I am the distribution guy. If anybody else tries to say it, they're lying because I had that trademarked. So I've spent my entire career in supply chain and logistics. I started out in the Marine Corps in supply chain. I've worked for companies like Coca-Cola, Grainger, MSC Industrial Supply, running DCs, managing inventory, trying to make things happen and go out the door. I spent 4 years at a software company called Infor. It gave me the technical aspect, how all the different software merges in and that sort of thing. Gave it a different perspective. Now I run a consulting company, do warehouse consulting, and do a lot of writing. Happy to be here, Eric.
Yeah, great to have you here. And another. So we've got one vote for the 2000s, one for the 80s. The audience is already chiming in here. So far, there's a clear favorite, but we'll get to that in a second.
Lots of the 80s. Another vote from the 80s here.
Eric,
Yes.
it's your demographic. You love 80s music. It's your stream. Clearly, you're going to have outweighed the options here.
I know if they're, we always pride ourselves on being objective and agnostic and independent and all this stuff. But I do have a very strong bias for 1980s music, I'll be honest. So guilty as charged. So Casey Jenkins, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, so I will say that my vote's probably more for the 2000s because of my age demographic, but don't get me wrong, some of the 80s music, it can definitely be kind of hype sometimes, just to kind of take you back a little bit. But so I'm Casey Jenkins. I'm the owner of 828 Consulting. We focus on small business consulting, basically process improvement within, supply chain processes of those types of organizations. I've done everything within supply chain, from freight brokerage to international supply chain management. I also teach supply chain at multiple universities and project management as well. So definitely bringing that more process perspective, I would say, into the conversation.
Great. Well, great to have you here. And this will be your first time at Stratosphere, right? So this will be your first time joining. You've been on my podcast a couple times before, but never at Stratosphere. So look forward to seeing you there.
Yep.
So we've got 2 votes for the 2000s, 1 for the 80s. That seems to be the main thing most people are concerned about. We should probably just turn this whole episode into a music thing because no one's asking any supply chain related questions yet, but I'm sure we'll get to it. Okay. So Jan Baan, you're joining us again at Stratosphere. You were there last year. You had a great presentation. Funny story though, real quickly before you introduce yourself. Of all the speakers, no offense to any of the other speakers, I was the most excited to see your session, but during the session, there was a fire drill in the middle of his presentation. And what was funny is he just kept going. And so the alarm went off and it was clear it was not going to stop. And then he just powered through and he just kept rolling. And some people couldn't hear, and he be damned, he just was going to keep going. So it was actually a really good presentation. So I'm looking forward to seeing you speak again, hopefully without a fire alarm going off in the middle of your presentation this time.
But sometimes, Eric, constraints can be even an opportunity. It's always good to see that. I'm, 47 years of entrepreneurial history in, I should say, real the focus aligning business and IT. And I came out of the mother of all complexity called ERP. In 82, we had already a Unix-based ERP solution was real differentiating. We were able to win the biggest deal ever in last century was from the Boeing deal, winning it from SAP and Oracle. And 20 years in ERP, I came to the conclusion and maybe a little too early, but I found it was obsolete because it's now part of Infor, but ERP was built without a browser. And it means even we see today, ERP have nothing to do with native internet. It's nothing to do, ERP does not understand supply chain. It's a big castle, it's totally isolated. But we cannot do supply chain without ERP. And therefore I start again after 20 years in BPM. And we built, say, these transactional systems, bring them together with even case management driven systems and focus on business process. But it was too early. That was in the infancy of the internet. Spent 15 years over there. And again, for the third time, we moved again to what we see moving from a real, we see platform as a service, who's the infancy of the internet. We move now to a real infrastructure as a service. Therefore, you take everything outside from one of the big three. I have chosen Google. We go extremely deep in Google, and we are focusing on agentic-driven microservices, but then adopting that with a real, what we see, decoupling ERP. That means I take all the ERP data immediately in a BigQuery. I decouple ERP, it's too complicated, and the kids from Google do not know ERP. And how to go to the supply chain means that all the data should be linked together. That means you move from transactional data to metadata, but it's not enough. We are now in semantic data. And in the semantic data, we can take every customer, like Google's customer data platform, even together in agentic AI. It's driven by agents, but the agents could be stupid. The agent is a butler, and the butler should report for a human. And we bring the wisdom to the human. And that means if you do good in supply chain, then you can triple your EBITDA. Even supply chain today is old-fashioned because what we do in supply chain, we can ship everything in a day, but it's already a half a year in a box. And that's also, we are so obsolete in what we're doing. And therefore, I even focus a little on the people is the core element. And the real element is how can we take all the data from different technology waves together, unite them, and bring them in an agentic AI-driven environment.
Right. Yeah, it's very fascinating because for those that don't know, I know you're very humble, Jan, but you largely pioneered the whole category of ERP software back starting in the 70s. Yeah. And I find it super interesting that you are now one of the ones leading the charge to create an alternative to ERP that may actually end up destroying the category that you helped create. So it's that creative destruction, that innovator's dilemma, Clayton Christensen sort of angle that I know you're a big Clayton Christensen fan as well. But I find that super interesting to see that in real life, how you've evolved and stayed ahead of the curve all these years. So just real quickly, turning to the audience, I appreciate the introductions. I appreciate you all being here today, both the panelists and the audience here today. Want to say hello to the audience here. Darian's joining from LinkedIn, says good morning. Chris joining from the UK. Thank you for being here today. Chris is a 1980s fan. So the joke's on you, Emma and Casey. So far, people are loving the 80s. Mike from LinkedIn says 1980s. Chris says 1980s for sure. Halil says hi from Turkey. Daniel's joining on LinkedIn from LinkedIn, says Melbourne, Australia, 1980s. Now I'm feeling self-conscious though, Emma, because I'm feeling like you're right. It's all just middle-aged dudes like me.
I was just going to say, just wait. The joke is going to be on you. I'm going to talk to your team and like sneak some like 2000s music into the like walk-on songs at Stratosphere or something.
That's
I'll
right.
like start a coup from within.
Like Backstreet Boys or Britney Spears or something like that.
Hey, Backstreet Boys are making a comeback at the Sphere right now. So
I will never admit this again out loud, but I do like the Backstreet Boys. Some of their songs, anytime I hear one of their songs, I like just can't get it out of my head. It's just so catchy. Drew, late 90s, early 2000s. So Drew's contrarian. I like it on LinkedIn. Darian says 2000s. Of course she does. If you knew how old she was, you'd understand that why she'd say that. Drew on LinkedIn says makes it memorable. I think he's referring to your Stratosphere session, Jan. And then Darian says it was iconic, Jan, regarding to your presentation. And then Elizabeth, finally, someone bailing me out here. Elizabeth on LinkedIn says best era, the 1980s. So thank you for your support there. And if I haven't made it clear already, my vote is for the 1980s as well. In fact, if you could see my wall right here, I have all music stuff related to the 80s. And Drew just pointed out that it's now on the internet forever. So we are going to edit that out. It'll get bleeped out. Don't worry, Drew. That will never be a trace of me admitting to liking the Backstreet Boys anywhere ever again. Okay, then one last thing, Darian. Oh, this is you.
I'm starting the coup.
Oh, I didn't know this was you, Em. Actually, I thought it was Darian writing this, but you're tagging Darian, said I want it that way ready as Eric goes on stage. It's funny because that's the one song that I like the most of theirs, and it's the one that gets stuck in my head the most. And again, that will get edited out and bleeped. It'll never be on the internet again. Okay, so enough about the 80s, at least for now. Just getting into the supply chain stuff, though. I want to talk a little bit about supply chain transformations in general. And again, this isn't just about supply chain management. I mean, this question actually applies to any sort of change initiative. But I want to start with you on this one, Casey, as it relates to when you look at supply chain management and some of the work you do for your clients. Why, or first of all, is it true? And if it is, why is this? Is it true that that the people and process side is more important or even more important than the technology side? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I feel like it kind of depends on what side of the coin you're on, right? Like when you're an organization, obviously I think the people and process side is definitely more important. When you're a tech company, obviously your tech's more important, right? But I do think from a supply chain or overall business operations standpoint, technology is just a tool, right? It's supposed to enhance the processes or enhance the ability for, your resources to actually execute their day-to-day tasks. And so I would say that the people and process side should be the starting point before you start to layer in the technology on top. And part of the reason I say that is because a lot of times you realize that what you think is actually the problem within your organization that a technology solution can solve isn't actually the problem when you start diving into what your people are saying or what your processes actually look like. So yeah, technology, I would say, is a tool and an enabler and not necessarily like the end all be all solution or finality to, different business operations.
Yeah, makes total sense. How about you, Emma? You've carved out quite the niche of being the people first advocate in the marketplace. Why are people? And so I know what your answer is as far as whether or not you think people is more important than technology, but why is that? Tell us why you're so passionate about the people side of change.
Well, so like I said in the introduction, while I was selling technology, I had the same solution that was situated at the top of the Magic Quadrant, no matter what customer we were putting it in. I had the same team that was implementing the technology. And the biggest variable was, and again, we were a process consulting company too. So we're going to take process out of that because the team that was implementing it would start with process and then bring the technology in. Sure. With all of those variables the same, we still had varying success of where we actually got the ROI that the customer was looking for, whether or not we solved the problems that they came to us with at the beginning of the conversation. And typically it came down to the adoption of the solution on the team side and how ready they were for change, what the culture looked like internally, and all of these things that surround the idea of the people side. And so yes, technology matters. You don't want to go buy a garbage solution and try to bring it into your company because that's not going to do anything for you. And I was spoiled. I had process consultants that would sit down and help us move through that process before we ever brought in the technology. But in my mind, the old adage of people, process, technology has an order of operations. And if you don't start with that first part of it with a culture that provides psychological safety so that people actually give you their real feedback about what's going on. And you don't start by helping educate people on how to use the technology or spot opportunities within your process to automate and all of these other things that start in that first category before you move on to process and then bring in the technology, you aren't ever going to get to the crest of the mountain the same way without that adoption from your people. And so it's not that I don't like technology. It's not that I don't think it's valuable or that it's not an important part of the equation. But I feel like what I see oftentimes is that people say, and especially like we could go into like the AI side, there's so many companies that are chasing the shiny or chasing this like easy button that they think is going to come with AI, and they start on that end, and then the people end up being this like last thought, and usually it's a thought of, ugh, people hate change, why are they making this so difficult? But really it's a leadership problem because they never addressed the front of the equation as they were going through it in the way that they were supposed to.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And Will, what about you? I mean, you sort of straddled the operational side of things, the technology side of things, and certainly the people side of things. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
Sure. It was always my experience that, typically the problem wasn't technology. I always found that whatever system the company had, was an ERP or WMS, typically it was far more robust than the average user knew how to use it, right? And typically how you get into that situation is you implement a new solution, everybody's excited, people are trained how to use it, you've got super users, people are dialed in, and then over time people get promoted, they move on to other companies, new people come in, and there's not that effort of retraining. There's not money set aside to properly train the new people that have come over. So now Mary's learning from Susie, who learned from John, or learned from Juan, and now all of a sudden we have a terrible system that nobody's knows how to use. And it's usually not, unless you have right now, you're using a green screen AS400. Probably, maybe what you have, it might be good enough. But going on the tech side, even in a software company, developing that technology, the different groups that work within, it's people. It's really people heavily focused. So if you're not managing the people, if you're not getting the right people together to make the right decisions to help forward that technology, it's not going to get better either. So you can't emphasize enough the importance of people, change management, and making sure that everybody truly understands what's happening and the why.
Yeah, and those are great points, and you all bring up good points about how technology for technology's sake doesn't do you any good if the people aren't coming along, and if your operations aren't coming along. Jan, what about from your perspective? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts here, because you're the technologist in you, the visionary in you that has created some of these products that have been on the forefront of innovation and changes to the space. I imagine you think of a lot of problem solving from a technology perspective, but how do you balance out in your mind when you're creating these products and the visions for these companies you've built? How do you address the people and process side of things against the technology?
Technology always should be hidden. If you look to top technology, it's maybe an airplane, maybe not even, it's a car. And if you see in a car, everything is commoditized and everything is decoupled. But in IT, we are stupid people. We are young. We do not understand advanced stuff. We do everything handicraft. We deal still with database. If you look to an SAP system and if you look to an Oracle system, it's still technology from a century ago. And that's the problem. We make it difficult. Technology should always be part of the business. And now we're coming in commoditizing real technology. Even in AI. What is AI? Nothing on its own. AI should only be a component in a workflow. And what we do too much, we expect that whole IT is important, but the upstream is too complicated even for AI, etc. ERP still. The value is even downstream with the supply chain. And therefore you should decouple it and go back only downstream. And if you see an ERP system, who cares for technology? You do complex elements, like in master production scheduling. Only a few people understand it. And people are saying ERP, only 10% of ERP understand the complexity of master production scheduling and all the stuff therein. And everyone talk it even ERP. But what is important then, you do it once a week, 2 times a week, and then you need one version of the truth. And then even if it's 3 days old, doesn't matter. But on downstream, you talk in milliseconds, and you have totally other elements. It's what we see is the real time on the one hand, and we see the data element on the other end. And if you are mature, you have a bill of material and you decouple it. And what we always did is hiding technology from the user. And in tomorrow's world, the CIOs will have a problem because tomorrow they will report to the COO. Only business cares. And only if you are good, maybe in data, you can report to the CEO if you are a data specialist in this AI stuff therein. But all the other elements, even what we take from the, what we say, the infrastructure as a service, where everything in DevOps and everything is there united. That is then hidden like in a car under the hood. And therefore, we should become manufacturers. And we are handicraft people. 90% in IT is handmade. We program, we handmade it, and then we sell it. We overpromise it. We cannot support it. We have no traceability. We have now what we see in high tech or in really cars or so is predicted maintenance. Now, I'm believing what we built all the time was a software factory. And a software factory is built of material. We built it on an SBOM, a software bill of material. I'm now on this moment generating 80% of all the code immediately in plain Java. Low code, I don't like it because in low code, you can't do the last mile. And therefore, you should do high code. That means generating it. And on the latest moment, then you take the human who can do the last mile, but still should not be vendor lock-in. Now, I hate vendor lock-in, although everyone was locked in my Baan time. But in today's world, everything should be open, should be decoupled. That means complex elements in technology under the hood of a car is decoupled. Therefore, an ERP system can be decoupled and you change it maybe only once in a half a year or so. It's good enough. But you bring it where you change it every minute to microservices. Now, and there are, what you see in technology is all the time, it's like in a car, you have 3 technology waves. If you have a Tesla car, every 5 seconds, maybe a car is born. But there is still mechanical stuff. There's still electrical and it's still software. In IT, you deal with 3 elements. You deal with silos, even today, which SQL, believe it or not, 90% is SQL data. It's stupid, not even big data. No, that means you have then silos. Then we move into business processes. It's too complicated. And we do it more the inbound of the enterprise, but it's nothing to do with supply chain. Nothing. It's too complicated. Then we go a step further, what we call workflow. Now, and these 3 layers should be decoupled and all with the same data model in the semantic data and the workflow. And the workflow is now amazing, can be done with a real, what the Kubernetes type of stuff. You can do 100 times more, 100 times faster, but all this old stuff is still there. Now, and what you should do then is combine them, decouple it, and then you give it in the hands of the job to be done, what Clayton Christus mentioned. And there, the EBITDA is 10 times more. Right. The EBITDA is downstream. Right. And the more downstream, the more value. And the more downstream, you win the tender. And you give it in hands of the business. Therefore, it should be owned by the business. Always. And what we do now, from the first moment, we can create everything already with the business owner. And we have all this UX stuff already to bring it. We can decouple data model and show it already there. Now, and these tools totally will differentiate. And therefore, ERP, what I agree with you, Eric, it will be anywhere, it's obsolete. It is totally obsolete, but we cannot stop it. We need it for the next 5 years still a little to adopt it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the ERP vendors that once were relying heavily on lock, they're still trying to get that vendor lock, but I think they're even seeing cracks in the foundation of that model as the world becomes more open, more flexible.
And if you deal today with 100,000 database tables, now in my Baan time, it's still 10,000 database, 100,000 database, and all they are there. And all they are in one big data element, we call it an SQL database. Now, it's older than I am in business. That means the most stupid stuff we do. No. And at the other end, we have the most modern stuff, what we see with customer data platforms, with all this AI stuff. No. And then you have to decouple it.
Right.
And bring it together.
Right. Absolutely. Good points here. And I want to say hello to a couple people here that are commenting on social media. Elizabeth on LinkedIn says, totally agree, people and culture. AI is great once things are established, but AI does not have empathy, which is a really good point. I think it's easy to automate a lot of stuff with AI, but the people side of it, so far, we haven't figured out how to automate that piece. I don't know if we ever will. And then Precious from Ghana is joining us on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here today. Chris has a good point on LinkedIn. Chris says updated process guides are important, which users can use with no loss of knowledge. And I think that's a good point as far as getting that tribal knowledge documented and creating sort of a central repository of how your operations work. That's important.
Yeah, but in my opinion, process is not enough. Process was the old world. And in ERP is never process, it's a silo. And in process, you bring transactional data together with case management data, but you do it more in the inbound part of the enterprise. And now we go to the outbound, to the supply chain, and then you collaborate. And in this world of collaboration, you need semantic data, you need workflow. And therefore, you should combine these silos, these processes, but downstream, you go real to the most modern stuff, and everything is mobility and all the other elements there.
Right. Good point. So one other thing I want to make sure the audience is aware of too, I've mentioned that these are some of the speakers that are going to be at our Stratosphere conference coming up in late August. I'm going to put up a QR code right above, right at the top left side of your screen here. You can also go to stratosphere2025.com to see the speaker lineup and just to learn more about the event. But it's going to be August 27th through the 29th. It's a hybrid event, so you can join in person in Denver, Colorado, or you can join virtually online. Great lineup of speakers and sponsors, and it's a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys can make it. I'll leave that QR code up here for a few minutes, and you can use the discount code EARLYBIRD, and you'll get 20% off your registration. So stratosphere2025.com. The code is EARLYBIRD for 20% off, and I'll leave that up here. So Will, I want to ask you a question, a follow-up here as it relates to some of the pitfalls and risks that you see in supply chain transformations, whether it's an automation project or a warehouse redesign, whatever the change might be. What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you've seen organizations fall into when they're going through those sorts of changes?
Sure. I think it's not having a clear strategy, clear digital strategy that matches the business strategy, right? I think artificial intelligence and machine learning is super important. I think everybody should start something. But, going and buying something because, this is a great salesperson, or it shouldn't be a point of disruption. Like, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to get some diapers. While I'm here, let me grab a case of beer. You go to a conference and I'm walking around like, all these great vendors. Let me have one of those. I think starting is important, but being thoughtful about it, taking a step back and saying, okay, what's the one KPI that we've really been struggling with? Is there a solution for that? And then being very meaningful about that. I think there was some other discussion about, shiny objects and shiny toys and just picking that. But again, not having a clear strategy that matches is this solution going to impact my bottom line? Is it going to make my operation better? Is it going to make my people better at doing their jobs? Am I going to increase my throughput and be better able to serve my customers? So that's where I see a big downfall is just in the start. And then the other thing is folks in distribution, manufacturing tend to be go-getters. So you want to just jump right in and get to work, and you forget the planning phase. I mean, you make a great analogy in your book, which is right on the table behind you. You don't want to build the house without having plans. You don't say, my first call is to the plumber. Yeah, I want to build this house. Come on out and put the pipes in, right? There's a step in a process. And as leaders that are go-getters, you tend to just want to get right in there, and it can cause you. It takes time in the front end, but it's going to pay dividends in the back end.
So to build on your analogy, it's like saying, I want to drink a case of beer before I change my baby's diaper. Is that? But you have a clear vision. You're very deliberate about it. You're not just having an impulse purchase of beer. You're actually having a plan that. That is a good point, though. Kidding aside, having that strategy and that clarity of what it is you want and what you're trying to accomplish, I think is super important, especially as you have people like Jan and other technologists that are out there building such advanced, great tools. None of that matters if it doesn't fit your strategy. So I think that's That's super important. What are your thoughts, Emma? Some of the biggest obstacles and pitfalls that organizations face when they go through supply chain or any other sort of change?
I think kind of double tapping on that idea of the vision. More often than not, and so Eric, you and I met through TikTok, so you know that I create a lot of content there, and I love the feedback that I get from TikTok probably more, sorry, LinkedIn, than what I get on LinkedIn, because people are not attached to their company when they're sharing their viewpoints, and they will share what's actually happening and tell you kind of their feelings. And the idea of a vision seems to be the biggest missing component in most companies tied to like any sort of transformation effort, that we are grasping for straws to try and keep up. Companies are terrified that they're going to be left behind, and that like FOMO that they get from not being able to keep up in their mind is what makes them make really quick, short-sighted decisions and create a mess of like spaghetti for themselves to try and like weed their way out of when they start to realize that they've created a problem. And the amount of times that I hear from people that they are burnt out from change fatigue because their company is constantly switching processes, constantly implementing new technology, shifting direction as an organization as a whole on a regular basis to chase whatever kind of thing they think they need to go after because they're afraid. Those are the things that are stressing out teams. Those are the things that are creating trust gaps with leadership. And those are the things that are creating a bunch of systems that aren't talking, that are creating data silos, like all of these problems that we've been talking about the entire time that I've been in the technology space seem to only be compounding the more that leaders make short-sighted decisions to go and do something out of fear, as opposed to having like a strong vision of like, this is where we're taking the company. This is why we're taking the company in that direction. This is what we need from you as our employees. And this is what we need to do as a team to redesign our processes and bring in the right technology to enable those things. And when you don't start at that point, all of these other things that we will have talked about and other things that we could bring up in terms of the common challenges that we see, it all comes back to those foundational ideas that for some reason we just decide not to listen to. And I think a lot of it comes down to that fear of missing out.
Yeah. Yeah. And we saw it with cloud, and we definitely see it with AI.
Will's ready. He's got something.
Yeah, we go ahead, Will.
Hey, before you move on, speaking of TikTok, what's a really interesting trend we're seeing on TikTok now is folks in their 20s discovering 80s music and just being blown away.
I know. I love how you brought it back. You're bringing it full circle, Will, back to the 80s. I like it.
If we talk over this technology, is it fair what we see today? Technology is so overvalued. We have only magnificent seven companies with $17,000 billion of market cap. And in reality, they do nothing for business. They're only making tools. And these poor manufacturing companies, they're only making 1 times revenue market cap. Now, in tomorrow's world, I hope that instead of 7 companies who deal with 17,000 billions of market cap, that we have 17,000 unicorns in manufacturing. The money, and what is now the most dangerous part we do, all those vendors are locked in. They locked us in. And they're saying, come to me with AI. That's the most dangerous stuff you can do. If you go to Salesforce or to Oracle with AI, they even lock you in their old stuff. AI should always belong to the company and never to the vendor. And this is the most, we are misleaded tremendous. And why is it that they're spending, because these 7 have 17,000 billions, why should they not spend many billions for AI to do it in their locked-in version? We are totally misleaded. And some people are saying the mafia is less corrupt than some other ones. They cannot make 90% gross margins, what this IT company sometimes can do. And therefore, be aware that AI always should belong in the downstream latest point for the job to be done. And always decouple this one. And always take care that it is not locked in. if AI is built in a locked-in version, you go deeper and deeper. Now, and that's we see today, if you go from ECC to HANA, etc., you go even deeper in. And change nothing in the old, take it only vanilla, take all your customization immediately in microservices. It's simple, and there is value in the customization is bespoke, is your own EBITDA elements, and it is simple, otherwise it was already in vanilla. Then you are decoupled. It's quite simple. And then ERP can say another 5 years, you change it not or a little, and you totally optimize there everything AI driven. And it AI driven is then real the value, and maybe you change immediately not only your cost, the cost is peanuts. Peter Drucker was prophesying already that every knowledge worker, what he prophesied in last century, could be double in productivity. That means half of the people, the labor is 60% or 70% of an enterprise. And if it is half, then maybe from 90%, say you have a company with 10% EBITDA, $100 million revenue, $90 million cost. Half of the cost, people related, could go to the EBITDA. In tomorrow's world, you will see a tremendous change in increasing EBITDA from technology if we do it right. Because we are not only reducing costs, we increasing revenue, but we have a multiple also from market cap. No one is forgetting that. And this market cap, we give it to the NVIDIAs, we give it to Apple, we give it to Oracle in this part, then it should be stupid. And it is our knowledge. And our knowledge is always, again, stolen, etc.
We're here with a panel discussion talking about how to redesign your supply chain from the inside out, looking at the people, process, and technology components of change. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I want to invite you to join me and other thought leaders in the digital transformation space to Stratosphere 2025. It's an annual conference we've hosted now for 7 years in a row. It's a great event. It's live in Denver, Colorado, but we're also offering it virtually via hybrid tickets. And we're going to have a lot of different speakers here, including myself as a keynote, as well as others that you may know from the industry. And this is a perfect conference if you're interested in any sort of digital transformation, including ERP and CRM and HCM. And actually, the theme for this year's session is AI and how AI is affecting all different types of digital transformation. But in addition to AI, we'll also talk about the fundamentals of digital transformation, including program management, evaluating the right software, digital strategy, change management, process improvement, all the things you need to know to make your project successful. It's also a great way to network and learn from others. So just being part of a community that is also like-minded and going through the same things you are, that's another value. And you can join, like I said, remotely in person, and you can also buy VIP tickets if you'd like more exclusive access to me and others from the Third Stage team and other speakers that are going to be there. So I hope to see you soon. Check out my discount code below for discounted tickets. You can go to stratosphere2025.com for more information, including the full agenda, and I hope to see you there.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
With 1,000 eyes and a good disguise, hit 'em right between the eyes, hit 'em right between the eyes. We knew I'd go.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 232. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their digital transformations. And we're here having a panel discussion talking about how to redesign your supply chain from the inside out. You know, one thing we were touching on as well is the leadership side of thing. I think a couple of you mentioned Emma, and one other person I think mentioned leadership in sort of in passing, but I want to come back to that and dig in a little bit. And I'll start with you, Casey, on this point. But when you're consulting the clients in supply chain management, how do leaders typically respond and get involved in these sorts of change initiatives versus how you would expect them to be or how they should be getting involved? What do you see there?
Yeah, it's funny because oftentimes I'm called in for what leadership sees as a problem. That's not actually the problem within the organization. They most of the time it boils back to it being a leadership issue. They're the ones not willing to change. They're the ones not willing to actually spot what the actual issues within the organization are. And, much to some of the other points that have been made, everyone wants a quick fix, right? So leadership is always pushing like, how fast can we get this done? What's the cheapest cost we can get this done? What's the silver bullet? And I think companies and their leadership teams need to really take that time, as someone else had pointed out, on the front end of identifying what is the root cause that we're trying to solve here. What are the actual problems within our supply chain? Realize what are the solutions that actually match those problems, and how can we build a roadmap to take those steps from A to Z without skipping all of the letters and just going from A to Z. I mean, I always use the joke about how I'll have people asking me, they want to go from Excel spreadsheets to robots like overnight, and it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. You can't really get there. So I think from a leadership perspective, it's really diving into what is actually going on within your organization, looking at, your leadership styles as well, and saying, hey, are we promoting, back to the people side of it, right? Are we promoting a culture that looks for these gaps, looks for these problems, and has our, teams and resources bringing them to light so we can actually make meaningful change? But it's really, I often get to where I'm like, nah, this is a leadership issue. It's not a process issue. It's a leadership issue. So
yeah. Well, and of course, when you've got a client, being a fellow consultant as well, you've got to be careful not to call the baby ugly too much. You've got to tread lightly, especially when you're building a new relationship. But it is oftentimes, I agree with you, it oftentimes is a leadership issue. And Emma, I know you've been super outspoken about this on TikTok and LinkedIn and elsewhere, but what are your thoughts? I'm sure you have some strong opinions here.
Yeah. I mean, the experience that I had going into organizations is very similar. When you sit down and it's like the refusal to look in the mirror and recognize that you're the problem. And I don't want to always point that, like, this is not me saying that there aren't people within organizations that are difficult to move and difficult to change, or that there won't be technology issues that come up as you're trying to implement a solution that cause headache and issue. But time and time again, the feedback that I get is that, we can't figure out why we're doing certain things, or, the idea that leadership comes out and thinks that it's this huge flex to tell their shareholders that they're going AI first. That tells every single one of your customers and every single one of your employees that you're putting technology over the top of them. And then, like, you look at some of these statements even further into the way that they're managing it and talking about specifically eliminating staff, specifically reducing contractors, starting to have it be a part of the way that people are evaluated. Never did we ever put in somebody's evaluation, did you use RPA effectively? But why is that suddenly something we're going to measure people on when we've decided that we should go AI first? But you also can't articulate to me what kind of outcome you're looking to accomplish other than reducing developers or reducing additional contractors. Like when we start to do that, we've lost the plot. The plot of technology is supposed to be to help us solve bigger problems, focus human attention and human energy on the things that we enjoy doing, the things that challenge us, the things that use the skills that we can't automate, like critical thinking and creativity and the human to human relationships, like the empathy that was mentioned in the chat earlier. And we've been chasing that carrot of being able to get us to the human work for a very long time. And what we've done with this approach is create more complexity, create higher work demands for the people that are in the center of trying to go out and interact with these 15 different platforms that they need to make a decision. And we're just creating that problem now on hyperspeed if you start bringing in AI to keep going against your bad processes and not looking at how you're looking to solve that problem. And so I just like want people to stop and take a deep breath and like think about what you're trying to accomplish as a company. When Yum Brands, who owns Taco Bell and Pizza Hut, came out and said that they want to be AI first, guess what? I don't want a taco that's AI. I want a taco that tastes good. I want a pizza that tastes good. I don't want you to be AI first. Use the tool. That's great. Use it to make your people more efficient or automate certain processes or avoid injury for humans. All of that stuff is great. But I want you to be focused on like what your mission as an organization should be. And so like that piece of like chasing the technology and chasing that at all costs rather than thinking about the why behind things is just like, it feels so simple. It feels so simple to say to a leader to like stop and think for a second and tell me what you want your company to be. But when you ask that question, it's like, we want to be the Amazon of our industry. Well, what the hell does that mean? Like, stop and tell me what you want to do as a company and then enable it with technology and the people that are alongside you, because otherwise you're just not going to get there.
What's interesting is it is the way you're describing it, the way it should be, the way you guys have both just described this, is that's the easier way. I mean, that's the irony of it all, is it's like that's actually easier to do. It should be easier to do than saying, well, we want to be AI first. In the case of Yum Brands should be saying we want to be customer-centric, customer-focused. What can we do to make it a better experience for our customers? And then sure, it's probably going to involve AI to some degree, but at least then you've got that clarity. But if you just say AI first, people get lost. Like, well, what is, to your point, what the hell does that mean? AI can do a million different things. I don't need it to do a million different things. I need it to do these 10 things to provide a better customer experience or whatever.
Well, and then you look at the companies that are like in that, specifically the announcement that they said from Yum Brands, like, we're coming out, we're AI first. They were like, great, give us an example of what that means. They're like, instead of having employees read a manual to figure out what temperature they should set the oven at, we're going to create a generative AI solution that they can ask what temperature they should set the oven to. It's like, like that. There's probably some other use cases that you could use it with, but like now you're just desperate to find a spot to put AI where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I think.
What is AI?
Oh, go ahead.
If you look, what is AI? We're misleading, and it's all nonsense. Because what are we really doing on this moment? Zero, and we're talking tremendous. AI could be great, like if I have a horse or I have a big car, or if I can fly in. Can change, but only when it is a component in my job to be done. Yep. And AI should never be executed without a human. And what is AI doing? It's my butler. Now, if I have smart butlers, I can do it. We see now on the front end in customer intimacy elements and what you do with included AI, then the knowledge worker is doing 5 times better. But it is still propelling to the knowledge worker. The good ones are doing better, and the bad ones have nonsense. And there's only a few good ones who understand it. And most, if you see, on this moment, there's zero ROI, it's very low ROI on AI on this moment, because we are in infancy. But don't underestimate it. That's the opposite. That means the young kids who can learn it a little, but should always be part of the business. and it should be part of your workflow. And then the AI is then even hidden, like a lot of stuff is hidden here for me. There's a lot in. I can say, okay, I don't need this stuff. I can do it without. That's nonsense. That will not work. But on the other hand, if I can use it, I can do my job 3 times better. And there is tremendous win, especially downstream, suppose in the procure to pay, in all those elements where we have simple workflow elements, we can win a lot, all those stuff in combination with invoicing, this procuring elements. We can, in 5 minutes, I can see a lot. Now, if I adopt this one, and that's what we do here now, then we can improve tremendous. But then, can you give it even to a ROI to a customer? The only element should be EBITDA for the customer. And we should do it with customer intimacy. The first, and the problem is we do nothing with customer intimacy. All these vendors saying, what's in for me? They're swimming, they're sinking, they're swimming like this one. There is lack of customer intimacy. Right. That's the biggest problem, because there is no ROI. It takes too long. We need only ROI for tomorrow, but not continuously. What are we doing in 5-10 years therein?
Right. And those are great points. And the audience is coming in with some great points as well. Drew on LinkedIn says, if we don't understand the why, whatever the thing is up for redesign. So the why is understood. So that's a great point, Drew. Thanks for that. And then Chris on LinkedIn says, leaders and companies need to have a clear vision on what technology, AI, and employees can do to improve productivity, whether it's the customer experience or that North Star, whatever that North Star is that you're trying to accomplish is super important. And Will, since we're going to lose you here in a minute, I want to ask you, make sure you have a chance to comment here before you have to drop off for a pre-existing commitment. I want to ask you a question around assessing and prioritizing process improvements before choosing technologies. How do you recommend in general when you're assessing a client's operations and let's say they come to you with a problem statement of, we need to replace our crappy system, and you ask them why, and they say, because it sucks. And how do you get beyond that to more of a, hey, let's look at your processes and understand what your needs are and give you that North Star before you start throwing technology at the problem? How do you navigate that with your clients?
Sure. Well, what I like to do is boots on the ground. I like to, put myself in their facility and then talk to all the people. What happens during receiving? What happens during put away? What happens during quality? What is your slotting strategy? What does pick, pack, and ship look like? And is the technology the issue, or is it process the issue? Is it space the issue? Is it not enough? Is it the storage meeting? Whatever it is, and really take a look at root cause analysis and to determine really, because if you look about like artificial intelligence, it's a tool. It's no different than a forklift, right? Can I move more equipment around the warehouse with a forklift? Sure. But if I don't understand how to use it, if you just say, hey, go jump on that forklift and move some stuff around, you might not have rack standing anymore, right? So same thing with AI. Is there a purpose for it? Do I understand how to use it, how to deploy it, and what the purpose is? A lot of CEOs are just looking at that and salivating and saying, oh, how many people can I fire and get rid of, and how much, because that's the new way to run businesses. We just can a bunch of people. You hear that Yum Brands, talking about, we're an AI first strategy. They're not talking to their customer base. They're talking to shareholders and analysts, and it might give you a short time boost, but if it's not deployed properly, if people don't use it, it doesn't end up in results and good customer service, it's not going to work anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were describing that Yum Brands case study, Emma, I was imagining a bunch of like 26-year-old Harvard MBAs from McKinsey or Deloitte or something like that coming in and doing their big presentation of how, imagine if you use generative AI to control or to figure out what temperature they should be cooking. And all these executives getting so excited about how cool that would be and totally losing sight of what the point is.
The best part of that, though, is, and I was going to say this earlier, is how, in my head, I'm sitting here like, Well, what about the rest of their supply chain processes that I'm sure have 9,000 different systems that aren't, conveying the right data or the right information? Is their data quality even sound in that side of things? What's their procurement contracts like, right? And I'm like, oh, but let's leverage AI to, change the temperature on an oven. That makes sense for that.
Right.
And to what the point was made earlier, you can't ignore the technology that is developing. Right. You have to stay up to date with it, and you need to focus on where you have opportunity.
Right.
But the problem for me that I keep coming back to, and Eric, I've got all sorts of stories about this AI first thing. This is on number one on my hit list right now because I am so frustrated with it. But you look at Duolingo, big app that made big news by coming out and being AI first, and specifically said that they want to reduce contractors. Or you've got the Microsofts of the world laying off people and then going and, opening up jobs overseas, but saying that it's because of AI and they're so efficient. This talking out of both sides of your mouth from the companies that are creating the AI solutions that are then going to sell those AI solutions, like the CEO of Salesforce. We're not hiring engineers anymore. We're so efficient. We have 650 engineer jobs open on our website for anybody that goes to care to look. So that talking out of both sides of your mouth doesn't help the perception of the technology. It doesn't encourage people that are working in your business to learn more about it. It breeds a sense of fear that the technology is going to come in and replace them, as opposed to saying to them, hey, this is something that's coming that we should spend time learning about. And then when you watch these software companies look at hiring new talent that has specific skills and lay off old talent as opposed to upskilling the talent so that we have a workforce that's actually prepared for what's coming and can help implement these technologies, it's why are we creating the world that we don't want to live in? Is it for the shareholders and positioning ourselves for analysts? That seems to be the best option in terms of the way that my brain works, because it just doesn't feel like a sustainable model when you look at projections of where the jobs are going to be and the gaps that we have for skill sets that are coming. We need to be preparing the people that are in our companies to help us with all of this. And going back to what you said, Eric, that's the easy way to do it. If you spend a fraction of what you would spend on failed AI pilots on upskilling your team to get them to understand the technology and find the right problems to solve, you get to implement it. You get to be an AI company. You get all of the benefits that you're chasing with this other approach, but then you've got a workforce that's ready and a model that's going to work.
Yeah. Well, and you're highlighting a problem with the industry, Emma, that you and I run up against often, being agnostic and independent and not affiliated with software vendors, is the technology space is a big echo chamber. It's a big echo chamber of how awesome AI is and all the great stuff it can do. The vendors are out there pushing it. They're actually wanting the vendor lock that Jan is saying is so healthy. They want vendor lock because that helps them. So of course they want you to use their AI tools and all that stuff. And then you get Gartner and all the industry analysts who are paid by the software vendors who are out there saying the same thing. So as a buyer, you start thinking AI. I mean, all the consultants, all the analysts, all the vendors are all saying that AI first is sort of the way to go. So let's really lean into that. And I think, if you really step back and say, what if you did nothing with your technology? Just crazy idea. I know it's crazy talk. What if you just kept your old system and made some more incremental changes, upskilled your people, put in some point solutions that solve a problem, maybe put in some agentic AI that can, patch up some of the old data issue or old systems issues. Is that the end of the world? I mean, that you get crazy looks from software vendors who say, no, then what about your technical debt? Or, you're going to fall behind if you don't do this now. And so it creates this panic and fear. And anyway, so I think we just have to look past the hype in the echo chamber to really look.
Yeah, but don't underestimate the value, but there's a big way to go. But if you have end-to-end all your data, and if I see in 5 minutes already what Eli Goldratt mentioned, the constraints and the business, but it's a combination, is a business element using skills. And then you have to understand that. And this AI stuff, but I can combine with great stuff, but have to do with all the data together, with all this old legacy together. We need these old people who understand ERP. Otherwise, you can forget and you do AI without the whole ERP data. It's 90% of the data in the beginning. It starts with ERP. You have all this data. And when this data is isolated, and these young kids are doing some things on the, say, front end, it should be united. But I should say, don't underestimate the change what it will bring. That means the next couple of years, and it does not mean that you have to lay off people. Maybe you have to increase and invest in people and in combinations of people, because you need the whole team. You cannot do it to pick up only a few elements and focus on this one, in my opinion. You have to do it for all your processes.
Eric, I do need to run. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Nice to see
Yeah, we'll
you.
see you. We'll see you in Denver
See you in
next month.
Denver. You can find me on LinkedIn or at thedistributionguy.com. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Will.
Bye.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Will. That was great. Yeah, and I want to get to a couple questions here. This is a funny one from Tom on LinkedIn. Tom says, importantly, I don't believe I caught Jan's take on the best decade in music. And he is correct. I forgot to ask you that, Jan. What is your favorite?
No problem. I'm old. I'm going back to 80, but I go to the 18th century. And the best music for me is Bach.
Oh, okay.
It's so amazing. If you see a Messiah or anywhere, it is the most amazing stuff. Hundreds of years old, and still people cannot understand the brilliant elements in those classical musics. That means my love is a beautiful concert and seeing that. But then later on, I go into the 80s.
No, that's very cool. So you're going way back, but old school. But what you're saying is you're old school like me.
I'm old school.
Just even more old school than me.
Yeah, even more. Yeah.
So here's a two-part question. I want to maybe just sort of bring this all full circle and wrap up. And I'll just open up to the general panel here, and whoever wants to answer these two questions, I'll combine them into one. One is from Sam on LinkedIn. He says, is there danger that AI will just allow us to do the wrong things more efficiently? And then Zay on LinkedIn says, what do you understand should be the preparation of human and cultural perspective to facilitate every company to move to AI first? So I'll just open up to general conversation here.
I think from my perspective, yes, and I see this all the time. Like, I work with a lot of very small businesses. So I'm not really on the enterprise side, which is where I've had experience with these types of initiatives in the past, but working with small businesses, and they want to leverage, AI to do different things for them from either a cost constraint perspective, a resource constraint perspective, which are valid things. But when you stop to actually look at what's going on in their organization, they're not foundationally correct. And so what they're asking me to do is to go in and try to take, processes or operations and make them faster that aren't even correct. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Then in 5-6 years, when you scale and when you grow, we're going to be back to the same conversation, if not way sooner. And so, it's from a small business perspective, it's getting the foundation correct first before trying to actually, go the route of leveraging some of these tools and technologies, because yes, you will just accelerate the bad. It's garbage in, garbage out. You'll just accelerate the bad. And I would say from the perspective of going AI first within organizations, I think that kind of starts with a leadership perspective, and how leaders are actually communicating and talking about, these new tools and technologies. Too, an education standpoint, I see this in academia quite a bit. Making sure that we're giving the actual tools, again, the people side, to the workforce, so they are enabled to actually go out, whether it's at this company, the next company they go to, or the workforce in general. But I think also it's enabling to actually spot the bad. I think a lot of companies want to cover that up. And they don't give their employees the opportunity to find the gaps and find the problems and bring them to the table and discuss them. They just want to kind of cover it up and say, no, we've got the fancy shiny, we're doing great. And I think we need to kind of level set with that and go, no, we all have gaps and inefficiencies in our organizations. They're all throughout, no matter what technology you're using. So I would say that's kind of, and again, I focus more on small businesses, so it's a little more complex with enterprise, but from definitely a small business perspective, it's get the foundation right, educate your folks, make sure that you are starting off with a culture that's open to these things. So then as you grow and scale, you're prepared to actually be a little more agile and adaptive to the new way and new and innovative way of doing things, I would say.
But you have the future. The business is going to small business more and more, to downstream. Enterprises are over. There's no reason to have 200,000 people together. All these infrastructure elements in the APIs, etc. And you see more, the value is going more downstream. And there is where you have the people, and there is where you're doing it. But that means you should focus on smart business. Bring elements together, have a good understanding there, and all those components can help you. Even can help you if you speak good languages and can communicate. But it's all different elements in smart business, and it depends then to your kind of business what makes sense. Now, a lot of stuff who are going downstream will be automated. All these transactions should be free in all those elements. In the past, it costs a lot of money, but now we see all the stuff are becoming automated. But the question is then, okay, how are you collaborate with all this stuff? And how are you dealing then and selling, etc., and do with this one? And then the technology, doesn't matter what type of technology, all those technology still can help us a lot. But the perfect is the enemy of the good. Because everything always should be the end. The end element is always a handicraft way of doing. And to the last optimization, lucky-wise, always seems a human who optimizes it. But when I'm better informed, I can win the deal. Therefore, we should not ignore the opportunity with this new technology, but it's not a be-all and end-all of it. It's only a component of the whole package.
Right. So Emma, what are your closing thoughts on that whole thread of how to navigate this whole thread?
I think it goes back to something Casey just said about the idea of like giving your team the opportunity to bring forward where they see challenges, and whether it is to focus on what the board is telling them to do or their shareholders are doing, there seems to be a little bit of arrogance, I'm sorry, to a lot of the people that are sitting in the leadership seats thinking that they know best. And I've actually had conversations with like C-suite executives in very large companies that have told me like, yeah, that's great to think that we can like ask our team what they want. And like direct quote, but they would just ask for a faster horse instead of a car. And to me, if that's genuinely what's happening in your organization, then you have failed as a leader in developing your team and giving them the skill sets that they need to spot opportunity. And if you are a good leader who focuses on that education and upskilling and giving your team the resources that they need, those resources span more than just the technology solution that you implement into the company. And if you can take this piece of the people side and listen to what they have to say about the process and where you have opportunities, and then you implement the technology, that's where like the magic that we all hear about comes from. But that magic doesn't come from an easy button. It comes from doing the work that everybody will tell you you need to do. And you don't get to take shortcuts because you're brilliant or you're smart or you know better than your team. You have to move through that process. And it's something that we've been talking about for longer than I've been in the industry. And if you do that, then you will get the results that you're looking for in some of the cases, because other times you're going to try something and it's going to be an experiment and it's going to fail and you're going to have to pivot and change and move in a new direction. But if you skip that, you're never going to be successful. And so I just come back to this time and time again. It sounds so simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. You still have to move through the steps. Just the same way that like someone can give you a workout plan and tell you that you're going to get like ripped and be super in shape. You still have to do the plan. You still have to move through the steps. And that means you still have to run a mile before you can run 5. And you still have to lift 5 pounds before you can lift 20. You have to do that stuff, whether it's AI or any other tool that you're bringing into your company.
Yeah, really well said. So a quick closing question for you all. I'll ask each of you the same. Well, I'll start with you, Emma. But what are you most looking forward to at Stratosphere? You've been there before. You're coming back again. What do you?
We have a 3-peat. I'm
Oh, that's right.
excited actually to see both of you guys speak. Yana, I missed your presentation last year. I had to fly out, so I did not get to be there for the fire alarm extravaganza. But I'm looking forward to. I honestly learn so much every time that I come and I sit down. You do a really nice job of bringing speakers with different vantage points, kind of across the board. And so I really love the opportunity to learn from everybody else that's there.
Yeah, great. And then how about you, Jan? What are you most looking forward to at Stratosphere?
To collaborate and to partnering. This is a tremendous an opportunity to stay strong with all the big giants, because there are smart people together who can collaborate, who can unite, who have money, can make money together. We have to do it together and learn from each other. And there is on one floor so much knowledge what we have. Use it. And that's unique. Therefore, it's also interesting to come and to see people and to meet, but real to see what can we do for each other.
Right.
And I learned there, this only you as Americans are most times saying, okay, synergy, and one is 3, and I like to have 2, and I give you 1, and then we fighting. Now, I learned something different. If you deal 1 can be 11, 2 1s.
Yeah.
And suppose, Eric, suppose I care for you, not knowing that you care for me. And if I care a lot for you, and you do a little for me, maybe I have only 3 or 4, but still more than 1, and you have 7.
Right.
Collaboration and working together, and then with an element that we can trust each other. So that even people, if you do, that we care for each other and there is so much to win, especially with all those people are coming together, they represent the whole world in one floor. With maybe that could be the most attractive ones to see. What can I do for you? Is there something here? How can we share some things? Because the business will be a collaborative business. And it's not here only an enterprise, because enterprise, there's nothing, but they're going, and they're only market cap, there's no humans. You cannot talk to no one. The business is humans who are doing it and doing it together. And that's what I really like very much.
Yeah.
Looking forward.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun, and you're going to have the distinct honor of being the one that's going to travel the furthest as far as the speaking group. You'll be the one coming all the way from Europe. So thanks for joining. Looking forward to it. And how about you, Casey? You've never been. This is your first time presenting at Stratosphere. What do you expect? Do you know what to expect, or what are you excited about?
Well, so last year I was actually supposed to speak, and then we got hit by Hurricane Helene, and I was not able to actually travel because we had no power. So I'm excited to come this year. I'm looking forward to all the brilliant minds coming together. And, it's cool to see on panels like this how we all kind of think very similarly, which is great. In the business world, I've learned that going with the flow is sometimes not always the best thing to do. So I love having folks who think, of going a different way and trying new things and being innovative together. So looking forward to just getting all these brilliant minds together and seeing what we can talk about and innovate and come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is half the fun, is just, I learned so much from these two, even just doing today's panel. I learned a ton from you guys, and there's going to be a dozen or so other speakers that weren't on the panel here today. So there's a lot we can all learn. So, well, thank you to that great panel discussion, and for the panelists for joining us here today. Great audience questions too. We had some really good questions there. We didn't get to them all, but really appreciate all the thought that the audience put into the conversation here today. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to unpack some of the discussion that we just had in a bit more detail, and we're also going to later in the show, after we have that discussion, we're going to get into simple ways to make your supply chain stronger in 2025. So stick around, and we'll be right back with more Transformation Ground.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola.
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 232. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. And Darian, we just had the panelists on the show, some of the panelists that, or some of the speakers that will be at our Digital Stratosphere Conference coming up in August of 2025. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I think it made me even more excited for Stratosphere than I already was. And I also found it really interesting for some of the different things that each of them mentioned. One in particular, even when Jan, like being, the ERP pioneer and everything like that, and now having Rapid, which is disrupting the space as well. But from him admitting that even like current ROI from AI is very low or zero, but there's specific cases of using it, like for knowledge workers or downstream operations or staying reliant on clean data and business context, all those different things he mentioned, I thought was a super interesting thing coming from him. And then I just think everybody made different interesting comments as well that made me more excited for each of their speeches at Stratosphere. But I definitely have some follow-up questions for you to kind of wrap up the conversation. The first one being, are you, and like for you specifically, are your employees empowered to challenge tech-driven decisions or just expected to execute? And how do you think that other companies also feel about this and can implement that same mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the right answer would be, involving people in those tech decisions, and that's what I try to do, within our own company. But I'll be honest, there's times where I've sort of forced technological adoption, for lack of a better word, not because I want to be a autocratic a-hole, but because there's times where there may not be the perceived burning platform, especially in our business where you have a distributed workforce that are out traveling at clients all the time. And it's hard to, it's actually very difficult for us to get people together to, talk about things like what tools we're using, how can we improve our process. And we try to do that as much as we can, but there's only so much of that you can do as a growing, successful consulting company. For example, one of the tools that we had that I just sort of jumped on in this runs counter to what Emma was talking about in the panel. She was saying, you can't just use AI for AI's sake and say, hey, we're going to use AI and force it down people's throat. Some would argue I've done that a little bit here at Third Stage, because I've said, we can either be destroyed, our industry and our business, we can either let it get destroyed by AI, or we can embrace AI and sort of in that mindset or vein of creative destruction, we can create the disruption ourselves and at least control it and embrace it and be part of it rather than waiting for it to happen to us. So with AI, I did push that pretty hard, and we are rolling it out as we speak to different project teams, and any new projects we have now are using these AI tools. But it took some time and it took some focus to where I had to push until the switch went off and people started to see like, oh, this is really cool. This is actually going to make things a lot easier. And so, I did the stuff Emma talks about as far as the adoption piece, but the upfront part was very clear. We are using AI. It's not a matter of, are we going to, we are going to use it. And it wasn't really a question for discussion, because in my opinion, it was for our business, especially, it's such an important thing to get ahead of that I didn't feel like we had time to, let's put together a study and spend the next year trying to figure out if we should use AI, how we should use it. It's like, we need to go because we know it's going to disrupt our industry in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one question with that is, what internal processes are still driving bad data into AI tools for every company out there?
Well, here's the interesting thing. It's nothing new. There's nothing that's changed the quality of data. It's just now with AI, it's really exposed the consequences of bad data. I think before, like, it's always been an issue. It's always been a sore spot, especially in the last 10 years as predictive analytics and business intelligence tools have become more advanced. It started to expose the deficiencies of legacy data and having inaccurate data. But you could always work around it. You could always find a way to have a manual workaround or a human, intervention to clean that up or to catch those problems. But now with AI, you can't do that. You have to have good data, or else it's just completely, I don't want to say it's completely useless, but it's largely useless if you don't have good data behind it. So I think that's the good news. So I don't think anything's actually changed for that, to be perfectly candid. I just think now we have a tool that is demanding and it forces you to have better data.
Do you think eventually there will be a tool within AI where it can help you clean the data if that's not already a thing? And do you think also that eventually you won't need that extra human oversight? It'll just be able to do it as the data comes in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you have more AI involvement in the data cleansing, that's going to speed things up. We're already seeing that in transformations we're involved with. There are tools that allow you to clean up data faster. Like, for example, you think about how you think about this just conceptually, I think it helps make more sense of it. But if you ask conversational AI to go remove all duplicate entries or, duplicate customer names, or any customer names that look similar, or multiple customer names with the same address, or multiple contacts that have the same name but different address, those sorts of things, you can use AI now to highlight those things a lot faster than you could in the past. So in the terms of AI, or in terms of data cleansing, AI is already having a huge impact. It's already having a big impact on development. So you start to look at things you might want to customize in your software, and suddenly it's not as big of a deal as it used to be to customize, because now you don't have to pay the super expensive developers to do it. You can use AI to jumpstart the process and speed things up and save money. So yes, we're seeing a lot of that. And as far as how if AI could help make sure that data doesn't get dirty in the first place, maybe. That's actually a good question that I don't have a good answer to, because at the end of the day, it's the humans that are going to screw it up. It's probably not going to be AI or technology. It's going to be someone like me or you, like your name. I'm going to go look you up. And because Chwialkowski, I have no idea how to spell that name. And it doesn't look at all like how it sounds, but I take a guess. I assume your last name starts with the F. I'm going to spell it Fiakuski or whatever. Not even close to how you spell your name, but I create a new record called Darian Chwialkowski because I don't know how to spell your name. And AI isn't necessarily going to catch that. So it's more I guess it highlights, at least in the short term, unless there's something I don't see in the future, at least in the short term, humans are the ones that you're going to have to train them. They're going to have to, behavior is going to have to change, and the focus on data and keeping it clean and going to confirm what your actual spelling of your name is, highlighting why that's so important in order for AI to work. I think that's going to be a behavioral component that needs to continue to be reinforced.
Yeah, absolutely. But a great conversation overall today. It was super fun to have all the different speakers on, and excited to see them in about a month now.
Yeah, I'm real excited too. It'll be August 25th through the 27th. You can join in Denver, or you can join virtually if you can't make it to the United States during that time. Go to stratosphere2025.com, use the promo code EARLYBIRD to get 20% off your registration. And you'll get to see Darian and I there. And of course, all the speakers you saw today and a bunch of other speakers that weren't on the panel today will be there as well. So we're really excited for that. So be sure to join us there. And we got another segment we're going to get to here today. Excited to play you this clip from my YouTube channel. It's about how to make your supply chain stronger in 2025. We've been talking a lot about supply chain management in this episode, how to be resilient, how to be nimble, how to adjust, how to adapt, how to automate, how to use AI. We've talked about tons of stuff, but we're going to try and boil it down into a simple 10 minutes or so on some things you could be doing to make your supply chain stronger here in 2025 and beyond. So let's roll this clip and we'll come back and talk about it.
Just to get started, how many of you are having supply chain disruptions right now with tariffs, or tariffs affecting any of you right now? Okay, most of you. Are any of you still dealing with the ripple effect or the after effect of COVID supply chain disruptions? Okay, so a fair amount of you. So as if our jobs weren't hard enough, being supply chain managers, we have these external things that we can't always control. And I'd love to say my presentation is going to solve all those problems, but it's not. It's really meant to provide a framework for how to adapt to things that you can't predict and how to improve your ability to adapt your supply chains. Just to get a feel for who's in the room and where you are in your journeys, how many of you are in the middle of implementing Epicor right now, or an Epicor product? Okay. How many of you are using an Epicor product? Okay. How many of you are on the most recent version, would you consider, of the product? Okay. So a lot of you are already in a post-production, post-ERP implementation environment. And so it's perfect for this presentation because a lot of what I'll talk about is how do you get more value out of the technology you have. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that gets overlooked in digital transformations and ERP projects in general, is companies invest all this time and money in great technology, but they rarely get the full value of what they could be getting out of it. And so hopefully today this gives you some nuggets you can take away to transform your supply chain, improve your supply chain using the technology that you've all already invested in. So today what we'll talk about, I'll do a quick introduction to myself and my background, and then I want to dive into supply chain volatility and how that compares to stability and what we typically would want to see in a stable supply chain. We'll talk about how to build resiliency, and then I'll go through a couple case studies and best practices that we've seen work for some of our client base. And then any questions you have along the way, feel free to stop me, and I'll leave a few minutes at the end as well if you want to, if you think of something toward the end. So just a real quick background, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of a company called Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting company that helps clients with their ERP selection, their ERP implementation planning, as well as implementation support and post-implementation support. And a lot of the work we do is post-implementation. So companies that have already implemented something and they're trying to figure out how to either fix problems with the implementation that post-go live, and or they're trying to stabilize and get more value out of the technology through process improvements and organization and that sort of thing. So we're completely independent, tech agnostic. We're not affiliated with Epicor or any other software vendor. And our job is really just to help clients meet their business objectives with whatever technology is going to work best for them or whatever technology they might already have. I've been doing this for about 25 years. I started my career in the late 90s at one of the big four consulting firms doing SAP projects. So I did a lot of big Fortune 500 SAP implementations early in my career. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I became a bit jaded in those early years of my career, seeing how massively complex and messy those projects get and how much bias was undermining client success. And when I mean bias, I mean vendor bias, blind spots, myopic focus on technology, pushing an agenda to sell more technology. That oftentimes leads to unintentional consequences that are negative for customers. And so all through my career, even after I left the Big Four and went to other consulting firms, I just realized that's just how the industry is built. It was built around selling software. It wasn't necessarily built around getting real business outcomes for customers of the software. So that's why I started Third Stage Consulting, was to create a more independent and tech agnostic view of the world and to provide guidance to companies that wasn't focused on selling any sort of technology. So we only make money from our clients. We're not getting money from vendors, or we're not incentivized to recommend certain products or implement certain products, although we do have experience implementing many different ERP systems to clients, and we have several that are using Epicor right now or in the middle of implementing Epicor right now. But we also have clients that are implementing NetSuite and SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, and other leading technologies in the marketplace. A big part of what I do too is I also am an expert witness, so I'll testify in court when there are challenges with an implementation. We'll go in and analyze what went wrong and provide testimony on why the project failed. And I bring that up because that experience base and that front row seat to big, massive failures and train wrecks teaches us a lot about how we can improve. What can we do better to help our clients avoid that sort of problem? And it sounds like most of you are through the journey for the most part, but I always view these digital transformations and ERP projects as an ongoing journey, something that isn't just one and done. You don't just hit the go live, flip the switch, and you're done. There's a lot of optimization and business value creation that you want to get out of the investments that you've made. And if anyone here is a classic rock fan, I named the company Third Stage after the band Boston. Their third album is called Third Stage, if you like late 70s classic rock. And the reason I chose that name is because really our job is to help clients reach the third stage of digital transformation. And there's a rocket launch analogy or metaphor that goes with that album, where a rocket launches, you get two stages, it gets it up into space, the boosters get it up into space, and it's the third stage launch that gets the rocket into orbit. And so I like that analogy because a lot of clients will get through a transformation, they get to that second stage, but they can't quite get to that ultimate future state that they're trying to get to. And so that's a big part of our philosophy, is we help clients get more out of their systems and their technology, whether it's new technology or even in some cases we will work with clients who have legacy systems that aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And so we'll work with them to figure out how to incrementally improve that and get more business value. And then of course we have clients who go the other extreme, which is to completely rip out their technology stack and replace it with new technologies. So what I hope you'll gain today is just to understand some of the supply chain challenges today, although I think you all probably understand it better than anyone, but I do want to talk about and have a discussion around what some of the challenges are that you're facing, and then also talk about some of the digital strategies and examples for how you can build supply chain stability and resilience as well. So to start, we talked a little bit about tariffs earlier today and how that might be affecting your businesses. Just to build on that a little bit, how many of you that raised your hand that said you're having disruptions with tariffs right now? How many of you are being forced to kind of move where you're procuring products, raw materials or products from, or you're manufacturing? Are you having to switch to different countries or find all new suppliers as a result? Okay, so a few of you. And how is it, if you don't mind me asking one of you guys, how is it? I mean, how is it stressful? Do you have a plan for it? Are you still trying to work your way through it?
Yeah, a lot of it is just weighing the cost of paying the tariff versus the higher manufacturing cost. And it would be a very simple decision if we knew the tariff rate wasn't going to change or increase or disappear tomorrow.
Yeah.
Kind of like, well, we don't want to say go ahead and ship it. If then a week later tariffs go away, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. But at least in the beginning, it almost sounded like it was going to be worked out with China. Now it doesn't appear that anytime soon.
Yeah. And then just this morning, there was a thing about the UK changing the tariff for the UK, reducing it. And I can imagine, we're always on the outside looking in, helping supply chain managers and companies with their supply chain. So we're not in the trenches with you guys in that same way you are. But it seems like that would just be a very stressful point to be in right now, with trying to just figure out how are we going to navigate this when we don't really know how the landscape's going to change. I mean, it could change tomorrow. It could not change for 6 months. It's probably going to change, but we just don't know how. How many of you that are working in supply chains now are experiencing stockouts or shortages right now, or just challenges getting raw materials or components for your supply chain? Are any of you struggling with that right now? Okay. And is that amplified with the stuff going on in the world right now, or is it just sort of an ongoing challenge in the same way you've always had? There are a lot of challenges that supply chains face today. I mean, you've always had the shifting consumer demand and the unpredictability and volatility of ebbing and flowing consumer demand. That alone, even in normal, stable times, if there is such a thing, that alone is difficult. And supply chains and technologies and processes behind the supply chain struggle enough as it is, just trying to get the right information and the right predictability around what the forecast is going to look like for demand, which obviously feeds the entire supply chain. So if you can't get that piece right, it's really hard to have an effective supply chain when your input, your core input into understanding demand is so hard to predict. And so what we want to do is talk about, well, how can we do better with that? What are some ways that we can improve our planning and forecasting of what demand might look like? We talked about tariff regulations, geopolitical tensions, war. I mean, we've had clients for example, in Africa that completely stopped their project and stopped their implementations because they're in an area affected by war. And obviously there's a Russia-Ukraine war, which can affect some supply chains as well. And then other just general geopolitical tensions right now, and trade wars and things of that nature are all things that are shifting what I would consider a fairly stable global supply chain up until COVID. We had about a pretty solid 30-year run there where the supply chains were pretty efficient. I mean, they hummed along and we didn't have any major issues until COVID hit. And you always had the issues like recession in 2008 kind of affected things in a different way, but overall, generally speaking, things were pretty stable until we got to 2020. And now in 2025, it's even more true in that the way the global supply chain was built back in the 80s, that really came to be into fruition in the 90s, it worked really well for a time, but now it's proving to have deficiencies and weaknesses in the way these supply chains have been built over the last few decades. And that's leading to raw material shortages that many of you have mentioned. Are any of you experiencing higher procurement prices right now? Okay. And you may or may not be able to pass that on to your customers, I suspect. I mean, I imagine that's a tricky balancing act, trying to figure out, do we pass that on or do we eat the cost in our margins? Labor shortages and transportation constraints are impacting multiple industries. That's another interesting phenomena that I don't fully understand since COVID, is that there seem to be a lot more labor shortages and it seems to not have gotten back to what it was. And so you hear on one hand that unemployment is at a certain level in the United States, but on the other hand, you hear that people can't fill jobs and they're struggling to do it. And I'm sure it's just, I know it's not just a net raw number issue, it's more having the right skills in the right places when employers need them. But still, there's labor shortages that seem to be a bit more unique in the 2020s than what we've seen in the past. The supply chain ecosystem and understanding what supply chain stability means. When we think about stability, we don't mean it's just static and everything's going to be fine and it's going to be back like it was 2001 all over again and everything's super predictable in our supply chain. But we are talking about how can we be more agile and flexible? How can we adjust? How can we plan a supply chain around the fact that we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, and how to plan for the fact that there's other things that will probably happen in the world that we have no control over? How can we respond to that and be more flexible and more responsive and faster in our supply chain efforts? So one of the keys to do that is to have that end-to-end visibility for faster and smarter decisions. So knowing everything from what your customer demand is to what raw materials you need to procure when, and how to get it to your manufacturing shop floor by what time, how to get to the warehouse and ultimately to your customer in time. And that whole process obviously has a lot of information and visibility and inputs and variables that affect your ability to do that. And so that's where technology like ERP systems, like what Epicor and others provide, that's where these ERP systems can help provide that visibility to ensure that you are able to not only see what's happening within your immediate supply chain, but also try and go further up and downstream to get more visibility into your suppliers, as far as raw materials and status of what their inventory situation looks like or what their capacity looks like. And so being able to extend technology through the supply chain and expand the footprint of that supply chain technology is super important and helpful in that case. And then there's also scenario planning and proactive risk management. It's interesting because 20 years ago, I don't feel like when we did supply chain transformations 10 or 20 years ago, it didn't feel like you really had to think a lot about what if this happens or what if that happens. I mean, there was occasional, obviously, things that would pop up with a supplier goes out of business or they raise their prices and they're no longer viable for whatever reason. That stuff just happens. But as far as the general predictability of the supply chain. It's just a different time now. And so being able to look at your supply chain and really stress test it and poke holes in it and figure out where are the vulnerabilities. And just as an example, if we knew COVID was coming in 2020, which we didn't obviously, but if we did, we probably could have looked at our supply chains and analyzed it, and assuming we had the right information at the right time, we could have looked at what would a pandemic do to us, and what would the risk of concentrating all of our production or procurement in certain parts of the world, how could that affect our supply chain, and what would we need to do as a plan B, either in the event of a major disruptive event or as a way to just hedge and diversify our supply chain so we're not so dependent on one supplier or on one region or country in the world. And so it's really a way to rethink your supply chains and think about how can we use the technology and data we have to get better data-driven decision making for predictive and real-time action. And then also looking at technology as a way to provide modular, more scalable processes and systems. One of the advantages of working with a product like an Epicor, when you compare it to like an SAP S/4HANA or an Oracle Fusion or even Microsoft D365, the advantage of working with a kind of a mid-tier provider like Epicor is that there's not as much likelihood of breaking something if you adjust your supply chain processes and technologies. You're less likely to break something that requires you to rethink the entire way you've implemented software. So a lot of times these bigger systems are so complex, and so there's so many different variables that go into them that it can be very difficult to make modular changes. And so you have an advantage here over some other ERP customers in the world in that you do have a bit more flexibility and modularity with the products you have now compared to some of the others that are out there. So some strategies to build resilience. In other words, what do we do about it? We know what the problem is. We're all feeling it right now. You've shared some of your stories and battle wounds behind that. But what can we do about it? How can we fix the process, and how can we put some strategies and tactics in place that's going to help us improve? Well, some of the ways that we can do it is certainly modern ERP and supply chain systems can help provide our ability to execute. Cloud platforms enable real-time collaboration and system integration. So the beauty of those of you that are in the cloud, which by the way, how many of you are on a cloud version of ERP right now? Okay, about half of you. So the beauty of being in the cloud is that it does enable more of these AI types of features, and it certainly supports better integration to other systems, or even if you want to get better information or integration with your suppliers, for example, being in the cloud enables that in a way that you couldn't do with on-prem, or you can't do nearly as effectively. So having AI, having integration up and downstream in your supply chain, having better data is really a powerful thing with these cloud solutions. And so we can start thinking about ways that we can use the fact that we're in the cloud. What can we do differently as it relates to our supply chain? Because I imagine there's some of you in the room that have implemented a cloud solution, but you might be trying to do things the way you've always done them within that cloud environment. So it's an opportunity to really rethink. Let's look at what we're not doing well, or where the blind spots are in our supply chain, and how can we use the technology we have to potentially address those. And also, by the way, what are some of the features that we have in our current new technologies? How can those features potentially help inform or give us some ideas on how we improve our processes? I know I gave the same presentation yesterday, and there was someone in the room that talked about the SMART technology from Epicor and its ability to kind of improve supply chain forecasting. They just implemented it. I think she had just said within the last few weeks, like within the last month, they had just gone live with this new technology from Epicor. And it was too early to tell, what kind of immediate impact it was going to have on their business, but it's just an example of a small piece of technology that can have a big impact potentially on what you've already invested in and what you've already got. So really looking at ways, especially with the way technology is changing today, it's constantly evolving. It's changing so fast that it's hard even for people like us to keep up with. So there's always new features, new capabilities you could be leveraging and taking advantage of, and that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of being in the cloud, and that's also what you're paying for. The whole model behind cloud subscription services is that you are constantly getting new innovation, new updates and enhancement to the software. In fact, so much so that most organizations can't keep up. Epicor and other ERP vendors are always going to move faster than the ability of most organizations to keep up. So it's a matter of really being deliberate about where you can leverage technology better to improve your processes. Also looking at composable architecture, that's a big thing we're seeing with a lot of our clients is not looking at it as just one big massive ERP rollout and implementation and system, but also looking at how we break it down into pieces and how can we optimize it at a more micro level within different parts of our business, including supply chain management. For example, if procurement is one of your biggest challenges right now and supplier management, then you can go in and look at those processes and look at optimizing what you're using and doing there without necessarily having to break everything or redo what you've done in finance and other parts of your business as well, CRM, other pieces as well. And I think where AI is going to have a huge impact, I know there's been a lot of talk about AI in this conference. It's hard to sit through any session without hearing AI at least 5 to 50 times in a 50-minute session. But AI, I think, for supply chain management is going to be huge. And I think in my opinion, AI is going to improve and help change supply chain management more than any other part of any business. Yes, it'll help finance. Yes, it'll help CRM. Yes, there's benefits all around the board. But I think in supply chain management, it really does lend itself well to AI because of all the complexity of the various data points that organizations are trying to make sense of, and how much variability there is in the data and how hard it is for humans to make sense of all these different data points, track of what's going on in the supply chain. So that's where I think the beauty of being a supply chain, these AI tools are going to be pretty powerful in enabling some of these game-changing quantum leap sorts of improvements. And then, final strategy that I'll share with you here today is digital twins and simulation. So really looking at almost like almost kind of how you would do a test environment before the ERP implementation. Many of you, I imagine, had test environments. You went through user acceptance testing, you worked through the problems, you fixed them, and then you went live. It's a similar sort of thing with the digital twin concept in that you actually create a simulation of what if. What if we can't procure from China anymore? What if the EU imposes tariffs on the US? What does that mean? Are we diversified enough in our supplier base? So it's really a way for us to create a parallel model that we can test and stress test and look at, and then potentially introduce improvements that we identify during that digital twin sort of stress test. So that's another way that we see clients trying to navigate and build a foundation to be able to adapt with the full understanding that they're not going to be able to predict everything that possibly could go wrong or change in the world of supply chain management. How many of you right now, are any of you using AI in any capacity within your supply chain efforts at the moment? Sort of. A lot of potential, and if most of you are not yet using AI, that means the good news is there's a lot of opportunity, within Epicor and other tools too that will allow you to potentially improve the supply chain in terms of the analytics behind it, but also just generative AI too. Figuring out ways you can use generative AI to provide efficiency gains along the way too. So it's almost overwhelming when you think about all the possible use cases of AI, and so I think it's important to look at maybe micro cases, low-hanging fruit, and sort of a bottoms-up approach to innovation where you look at specific pain points or issues you're having in your supply chain and look at ways you might use AI to solve those problems, and then test it out and roll it out at scale. And so it's kind of an interesting time right now because it's again a good opportunity to have a continuous improvement mindset and a good opportunity to take advantage of what you're already paying for, especially for those of you in the cloud. You're paying for these great products that are being developed every day, so you might as well figure out ways to take better advantage of them. So just to share a couple of examples here and case studies of what we've seen in a couple of different situations. One is a manufacturing company that we worked with that was having global parts shortages. And so that what they did is they did multi-tier supplier integration. So they started getting more data points from their suppliers further upstream rather than just waiting to see, what is the ATP that they give us to be able to promise, and are they going to deliver it on time or not. It's more looking further upstream to what their capacity is, what their availability is, what their inventory is, and just having that more collaborative partnership with your suppliers to share information and visibility so that you can then know, where your risks are and where the big challenges might be. And so by doing this, demand sensing to look at, getting different data points to pick up demand on the because they're a B2B manufacturer, so they were able to get information from the customers as well in predicting their demand better, and they were also able to get information from the multi-tier suppliers as well. So they covered both sides, the upstream and downstream aspects of their supply chain, and they integrated more data and more technology to get that information and that visibility. And so as a result of that, they're able to reduce the lead time pretty significantly. And this is a pretty complex manufacturer. So they manufacture end products that have hundreds of different raw materials. And all it would take is that, that one raw material that was critical to finishing it. You could have the other 99 already in stock or ready to go, but that one that you're missing can disrupt the entire supply chain. So you don't have to fix a lot. If you fix that 1 out of 100 that's causing a problem, that's a big impact. It can have a big savings as well. So that's what happened here with this client is that sort of lead time reduction. And then the second one is a distribution company. So I wanted to give kind of an example for manufacturing, distribution, and retail.
Did it require significant change in their headcount and resources, or were they able to use their internal team they already had to develop this?
Yeah, they used their internal team. I mean, we worked with them to help them through it, but they didn't have to go hire new headcount permanently or anything. They did have to. It was much less of a technology initiative than it sounds. It was actually more of a change management, process improvement type of thing, because a lot of it involved external third parties, involved the suppliers and the customers, and getting their buy-in and getting their involvement. So that was the hard part. But the good news is they didn't have to buy a bunch of new technology, and they also didn't have to hire a bunch of headcount either. So yeah, it was interesting how small little things can have such a big impact. And it actually reminds me of remember a couple years ago, after we were 2 years into COVID or whatever it was, so maybe in 2022 or 23, a lot of the American car companies were saying that they had all these thousands of cars just sitting on their lots because they were manufactured, but they were missing that one chip from South Korea that they couldn't get, or that one component that they just couldn't sell these cars. So they were sitting all this inventory for forever. And it really, obviously that cost them a lot of money to have these cars that were almost done. You had all the money tied up in it, but you couldn't sell them yet because of the component or that one piece that was missing along the way. And in fact, I bought a car recently, like a year and a half ago, and they bought it to me as it is, but I'm going to be able to live without this, so don't feel bad for me. But the automatic parking thing that cars have, that you just hit the button and it parallel parks for you, it had that feature, but it was missing a chip that doesn't allow it to work. So they knocked a little bit off the price and said, we'll just sell it to you as it is. But it was just a reminder of how supply chain is still affecting us today. Like I said, I will survive not being able to parallel park with computers, but it's just a reminder that that's just one example of many that organizations are having right now. And so another was a distribution company, and we look at manufacturing, want to look at distribution, we'll also look at retail as well, because we do work in all three industries. By the way, most of our clients are in manufacturing, distribution, or retail. I'd say 70 to 80% of our revenue is in that space, so we have a lot of case studies to draw from here. But this one was more recent too, in terms of the tariff disruptions and fluctuating demand. Their solution was a cloud-based inventory and logistics optimization. So here they did put more technology in place than the first case study. These guys needed technology. They didn't have a modern technology to help them through this process. So by putting in new technology and getting data up and down the supply chain, and that they're able to reduce their stockouts by 30%. So, and that's the key too, is that, you want to reduce your stockouts, but you also don't want to necessarily have to stockpile tons of inventory. And that's, the $1 million question here is, what's the right answer and what's the right balance? And part of that is a financial decision. So you're just making sure you're aligned with your finance team and your CFO on what's more important, what's going to give us the best return on our investment. Is it to have that excess inventory potentially, knowing that we're going to be able to service our customers? Or are we okay with a certain stock out rate, knowing that we're optimizing our inventory levels? And so obviously you want to find an ideal mix of both, and you can strive for that, but you're never going to be 100% in your accuracy or in your ability to do that. And then a retailer that we worked with was a heavy e-commerce provider, so a lot of their sales were online rather than bricks and mortar, and they used AI forecasting warehouse management system upgrade to improve their business. And so AI they used to better predict the e-commerce demand, because it was at one point was a new channel for them. They were bricks and mortar, and then they opened up the e-commerce side of things, and that e-commerce side, they just weren't as accurate as predicting demand. And so they used AI to better understand the patterns and the purchasing behavior of their customers. And so that's another example of where AI can help. And then, they again invested, like the second case study, they invested new technology on the warehouse management side. They were having trouble with the whole pick, pack, ship process was not effective. They also had warehouse design issues too that were unrelated to the software. So that was part of the improvement as well. And all of that led to 20% improvement in on time and in full delivery. So some of the best practices and lessons learned here I'll share, and then we'll open up to questions here too, is that starting with business process improvement first is a great way to learn how you can better use technology, especially if it's technology or need an incremental improvement or addition to your technology, by defining and understanding where your processes are working well and where they aren't working so well, or where there's opportunities to improve them. It really helps you focus and be more deliberate about how you could use technology improvements, as well as improvements to your people and your processes too, the training and the way processes are designed. All that good stuff can be improved without having to necessarily invest a ton of money in new technology. Ensuring you've got alignment between IT operations and supply chain, that's super important, and even finance. I just mentioned how finance is important too, because supply chain is where a lot of the money is sitting. And so making sure your finance is on board with the strategy as well, making sure you're all on the same page and have a clear understanding of what the objectives are and what the priorities are, because there are oftentimes competing priorities internally, which is another factor that needs to be considered in addition to all the external stuff that we've talked about so far. And then investing in training and change management to drive adoption. I can't tell you how many projects I've done where a client calls us and says, our ERP system, we just implemented, it sucks, it's not working, we need someone to come in and fix it. And so we'll go in and look at it and say, actually the technology's fine. There's other issues though, in the way you're using it and the way your processes are misaligned with the way the software works and vice versa. So let's figure out how to fine tune it. And a lot of times it just comes down to training. Like you've got this feature, this module over here that no one's ever been trained in, you didn't even turn it on, you own it, but you never turned it on. A lot of times little things like that, there's a ton of them in most organizations we go to. So whenever a client says to us, our ERP system sucks, we're always very skeptical. Does it really suck, or is there something else going on with the way you're using it? And then of course, companies like Third Stage, being independent, vendor neutral, tech agnostic, we can help you figure out ways to use whatever tools you need to use, whether it's technology, people, process, strategy, alignment, whatever it is. We can help you through that process to help you get more value out of the systems. And I've been thinking lately about how it'd be fun to do a study. And when I say fun, I don't mean like you'd want to do it on a weekend, but it'd be kind of interesting. Maybe that'd be a better thing to say. But I thought it'd be kind of interesting to measure throughout the United States or even globally how much money is lost right now because organizations just aren't optimizing what they've got. How much of an ROI has been wasted on ERP implementations and technology in general. Not because the technology can't do what they say they can do, but because the organizations haven't figured out how to use it the way they should. And when we go into these assessments, there's always a big chunk of improvements that they could be making right now that have big immediate value. It may not solve the long-term problem of needing to stay up to date and current on new technologies and whatnot, but there is a big subset of stuff you could be doing right now without any sort of technology investment. And so that's a big part of what we look at too, is just objectively speaking, without having an agenda to try and sell more software, we always help our clients figure out how to get more out of their supply chain and overall business efforts too. And so some of the ways that we can help, and even if we don't help, some of the things you might do to go get started on your journey is to look at digital strategy and supply chain roadmap. So what is your digital strategy? What is that ongoing plan? Just out of curiosity, how many of you have an ongoing continuous improvement or evolution of your current ERP stack and environment? Are any of you still, even those of you that have implemented already, are any of you still making adjustments, enhancement as you go? Okay, most of you it looks like. Yeah, and I think just having a deliberate roadmap around that, and again, not just focus on technology, but also people process as well is critical. And then technology selection and implementation planning, if there is a technical need or a technology upgrade or replacement that you think needs to happen, that's we can help with as well, as far as objectively defining what tools are best going to help you. And then organizational change management, supply chain optimization too. That's another area we're good at. We work in a lot of supply chains. We do a lot of change management. We do a lot of process improvement, and we do a lot of ERP implementation. So putting all that together to look at the whole big picture of your supply chain is something that we're good at. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of experience with manufacturing, distribution, and retail.
So that was our clip from my YouTube channel about how to make your supply chain stronger in 2025. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways, Darian?
Yeah, I thought it was a great video and a great addition to today's conversation for sure. One of the biggest points I thought you made throughout that video, though, was most companies already have the tech that they need, but they're not using it well or the way they need to for their company. So one question to kind of expand on that, Eric, is what are the most common process gaps that kill the ROI after go live with some of these systems?
Well, I think first of all, the denominator of ROI being the cost side of things, I think that's where the first domino falls of, failed ROIs. You spend too much money on the implementation in the first place. And so that gets back to, having a clear vision of what you want, having a clear phase zero in place, having the right governance and project controls in place, making sure you manage your vendors and your consultants, don't let them manage you. All those things are success factors to make sure you don't have cost overruns. But beyond that, once you go live, then that's where the benefit side of the equation comes into play. And that's where a lot of companies that spent too much time on the implementation, too much money, end up with watered down results because they weren't effective in the way they rolled out the technology. They might have built perfect technology or beautiful technology, but the people aren't able to use it. It doesn't fit the operations. People are having to do workarounds and things like that, and it waters down that benefit side of the equation. So I think it's really important to have a business case, not just to justify your project, but also to manage the value creation. Where is it that we thought we would see value, and where are we not seeing the value? And it's okay that you're not going to see the value right away on day one, but if you don't measure it and you don't go back and optimize, you're just not ever going to realize it. So that's the big takeaway for organizations is don't stop at go live and just flip a switch and assume that you're going to get the benefits, and whatever they are. You're going to get some benefits, but you're not going to get all the ones you wanted. No matter how well you ran the project or how well you did everything along the way, you still have to optimize and fine tune to make sure you're getting that full value before you move on to the next phase of the project.
Yeah, that's a great point. And on that too, one of the other things that you definitely highlighted was the need to shift from static supply chains to adaptive scenario-based models. Can you, explain what the first step to building that kind of stress-tested supply chain model would look like, or what that would be?
Yeah, earlier in the episode, I had made a comment about digital twins and how, creating a electronic simulation, almost like a parallel universe where you take your actual supply chain, your actual data, and you simulate it over here and run a bunch of stress tests and what if analyses on it to see how your supply chain would respond or be affected. And it also allows you to change some of the variables, like what if we expanded our supplier base in this part of the world, or what if there was a big disruption because of war or geopolitics in this part of the world, what would that do to our supply chain? So it allows you a chance to run simulations using your existing supply chain and doing that what if analysis. So that's back to our opening segment when we talked a little bit about that. I'd come back to those same points.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question. When you're advising clients facing supply chain chaos, what's the first step you recommend that they take?
Yeah, the first step when you've got supply chain chaos is to do a quick sort of a SWAT team, quick hit analysis of what's wrong, because chances are pretty high you're going to have 100 problems you could be solving right now, but you've got limited time, budget, and resources. So what are the ones that are going to have the biggest impact? So I think the first thing is understanding what the real root causes are and what can you start attacking today to help alleviate some of the symptoms that you're seeing. But generally speaking, when we go in, having that outside perspective and being able to quickly hone in on here are the real issues that you can be addressing right now at a relatively low cost and risk. Those are some of the first steps and most important things that organizations can be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But what a great episode today. I feel like we covered so much and it was really great.
Yeah, I had a fun time. Anytime we talk about supply chain management, that's a personal passion of mine. I don't know if I mention this often, but my master's, I got my MBA, my master's in business with an emphasis in supply chain management. So my real passion from the start was always supply chain management, and I just love this stuff. So it's fun to see. It's fun to have a whole episode focused on supply chain management. So thanks for being part of that, and thank you to our panelists for being here today, and thank you to the audience for the great questions and comments along the way too. So new episode next week. We'll look forward to seeing you then. If you want to see past episodes of this show, anything you might have missed, go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. Share that link with a friend or colleague, someone you think might benefit from watching this podcast and learning from us here. And we'd love to grow our audience community there as well. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll see you soon. Take care.